Well, in the words of the now disgraced philosopher Diddy, today it's all about the Benjamins. We're talking about cash and the importance of cash in our lives. Cash gives you something that investments just can't, and that is freedom. Freedom and flexibility. But how much cash should you have? How much is too much? How much is too little? We want to get into that today. Cash equals freedom and flexibility because cash is accessible. Cash is liquid. You can't buy groceries with your 401k, or at least I don't think you should, right? So if you've got $1 million in the stock market, but you've only got $1,000 in your checking account, I mean, you're rich on paper, but you're cash poor. That's not an ideal scenario to be in. So I want you to think of cash like your financial breathing room. You don't want to ever feel like you're having to hold your breath until the next payday. You want to have some breathing space, an appropriate amount. So the analogy that I'd like to use, and you can think of it this way, is cash is like the water in your canteen on a long hike. You need to bring some with you. If you don't bring any water, if you don't bring enough water, it's going to be bad. But you also don't want to carry a 5-gallon drum on your back, right? There's a danger of having too little cash, but also there's a danger of having too much cash. So let's find the appropriate amount. So before I jump into that, just real quick, an aside, is it smart to keep physical cash? Some people prefer to actually have, literal dollar bills on hand. And I would say in general, yes, I'm totally fine with that, but in smaller amounts. A few $100s, maybe a few $1,000s in actual physical bills, I think is reasonable. And the reason you might want to do this is just for a worst case scenario. If there's a natural disaster, there's a power outage, there's some type of hacking event on the bank servers, and you can't digitally access your funds, your bank account for a few days, for an extended period of time. Having physical cash would be helpful. I think the reason, though, that a lot of people want to keep their money in physical cash, though, is they're thinking even more worst case, like apocalyptic scenario, all the banks, collapse, they don't trust the banking system. Well, the thing is, you are opening yourself up to a whole nother risk. Like, if you're just going to have a safe in your house with $50,000 in cash in it, you're also taking a pretty big risk. And think about what's more likely, that our entire banking system collapses and everybody who has money, digital access to money loses that, or that somebody's going to find out that you have $50,000 in cash and they're going to break into your house while you're gone and break into your safe and steal your money. I mean, they're both very, very unlikely, but there is also a risk on that end as well. So personally, I don't like the idea of keeping vast amounts of cash on hand physically, but a few $100s, even a few $1,000s, I can understand, just for more of those minor disruptions and what if scenarios. Also, obviously, keep it somewhere safe, keep it somewhere secure, and don't forget where you put it. Don't go to the beach and bury it in the sand, that sort of thing. Now, how much cash should you have? What's an appropriate amount? The standard is 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. So if you spend $4,000 a month, 3 to 6 months is somewhere between $12,000 to $24,000 that you should have in cash. Now, again, not physically, but just available to you in an account where you can quickly and easily access it without penalty, and it's not in something that fluctuates in value day to day. Now, why 3 to 6 months? When is it appropriate to be closer to 3 months? When do we need to be closer to 6 months? Well, 3 months is good if you've got much more stable income. Like, for instance, you're a dual income household, you have a very predictable salary, predictable income each month, or just a guaranteed source like Social Security or a pension or something along those lines. 3 months would be, would be appropriate. You need to be closer to 6 months if your income is less predictable. So if you're self-employed, if you have variable income, like a lot of your income depends on commissions or bonuses throughout the year. If you're a single income household, you just need to be more conservative and have more money, because there's a lot more that could go wrong, or a lot more that is unknown. So you want to be closer to the 6 months side of things. One extra caveat I would add to that is, if you are in retirement, we need to be thinking more like at least a year worth of our expenses in cash, or a cash-like investment. So like a high-yield savings account, a money market account, something along those lines. Now, why so much in retirement? Well, it's because once you're in retirement, you're no longer working, and if you have unexpected expenses, it's not as easy to make up that gap. While you're still working, if you have emergencies, you have more of a capacity and ability to make that up quicker because you can work extra hours, you can take on a second job, you can maybe take on a new job that has a higher salary. But when you're retired, not so easy to just jump right back into the workforce and find extra income in that way. But here's the thing, when I say a year's worth of cash, you're like, oh, wow, Nate, like that's so much money that I would have to have in my checking account. It doesn't have to be in your checking account. In fact, actually, it probably won't be. A year's worth of cash is across all accounts. So checking accounts, savings accounts, but even your retirement accounts. For retirees, a lot of times what it makes sense is, yeah, maybe they have an IRA or a Roth IRA, but what's in that account? Okay, some of that might be in stocks, some of that might be in bonds, but a portion of that can also be kept in cash. So across all of your accounts, I would say having about a year's worth of expenses in cash would be a good idea. So, and to use another analogy here, cash it's like your lifeboat on the cruise ship. You hope you never have to use it, but man, do you feel a lot better that it's there in case of emergency. And here's what I found just from life experience and from talking to many, many people, and that is things will go wrong. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. A car is going to break down. There are going to be layoffs. There is going to be unexpected medical news. There is going to be a home repair. There's going to be a leak. There's going to be a pipe that bursts. So you have to have money on hand to take care of those unexpected expenses. There's going to be a family member that passes away. We've got to get flights to go out for the funeral. And those things are all going to tend to happen in clumps. They don't get spaced out every 2 years. It's like this year was just a crazy year and we had 4 things happen in the space of 7 months. And if you don't have cash on hand to help float you through those times, what are you going to have to do? Well, you're going to have to put it on a credit card. You're going to have to ask, to borrow money. You're going to put yourself in a very vulnerable position. So having cash on hand is that lifeboat in case of emergency that you're able to get through those unexpected things and then come out the other side with no debt and be able to then build back up your rainy day fund. So it's a cushion. It's a safety net for you, and that's why it's really, 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 really important. Now, where should you keep this cash? We've already talked about physical cash. Maybe you keep a little bit in physical cash on hand. But generally, I would say 1 month of your expenses in your checking account would be good. You want to have some money flowing in and flowing out on a regular basis. You don't want to be taking that down to $1 right before payday. So have a little bit of cushion in your checking account. But anything above that, it would be good to put it in something that gets at least some competitive interest rate while still maintaining flexibility, accessibility. I personally like to use high yield savings accounts, or you can use even money market accounts. These are similar in the sense that you can take the money out at any time. There is no penalty. You're not putting it in the market. It's not like if the stock market is down one day, all of a sudden now I take my money out and it's actually dropped in value. And it has a stated rate of return. With high yield savings accounts, with money markets, typically that rate is going to fluctuate based on interest rate environments. So right now, most money market high yield savings are in the range of 3.5% to 4%. That would be a competitive rate of return. So if you're getting around that right now, as of the time that I'm recording this, that would be good. But if interest rates come down, you're not going to be able to get as much. If interest rates go up, you'll probably be able to get more. And that just allows you to get at least a little bit of something on the money that's sitting there anyway, ready to be used. You don't want to put this in the stock market. You don't want to put this in cryptocurrency. You want to put it in something that is safe, that is liquid, and that is accessible. There's a problem, and so far we've really just talked about the problem with having too little in cash, but there is also on the other side a problem with having too much cash. And this is one that people don't usually think about, because when you have $100,000 in your checking account, when you have $300,000 in a money market account, that feels very safe, because it's like, wow, look at all this money that I have. It's just sitting there ready to go in case I need it. But the problem is you're losing value most likely over time due to inflation. When you have too much cash on hand, it's not working for you to the extent that it could be, and you're losing purchasing power. So for instance, if you've been making 2% on your money in your savings account for the last few years, and we have a big spike in inflation, which we did over the last 4 to 5 years, where things rapidly increased in prices, well, guess what? It may feel like you've been making money all along because you're getting your regular interest payments and you're seeing that tick up little by little, but you've actually lost a lot in terms of real purchasing power. So maybe your $100,000 has now grown to $108,000, but the problem is $100,000 worth of stuff now costs $125,000, and that's not good. You've lost real purchasing power. So holding too much cash makes it harder to build wealth and to outpace inflation over time. So you want a safety blanket, you don't need a safety mountain, right? This is why when it comes to like investments, you likely want to have some portion of your investments in more conservative things like high quality bonds or in cash. But you also need to have some money in growth investments like stocks so that you can outpace inflation over time. In fact, I'm going to do an episode here soon on a really great retirement spending strategy called the buckets strategy, where we use, and I use the analogy of firewood to illustrate the importance of having different types of, having your money in different types of things over time. And if you want to think of like, if you're trying to keep a fire going for a long time, like, you want to keep the fire to last you through the winter, well, you need firewood in different places. You need firewood in the fire to keep it going now. That's like cash. But you need some firewood very close to the fire so you can quickly, feed it and as it starts to dwindle down. But you also are going to need a big old stockpile of firewood somewhere outside that's going to be able to last you throughout the winter and that you can keep going back to. So one last thing I'll say here before we wrap up this episode on cash. There is a difference between your rainy day fund, your emergency fund, and cash goals. So sometimes people get this mixed up. So they save up $15,000 in their rainy day fund, and that's their in case. But then they also need to buy a home, or they need to buy a car, or they need to, they want to go on vacation or what. And so they have some short-term goals that they want to save up for in cash. You have to do that separately. And I think a lot of times it actually makes sense to do that in a separate savings account, because if you put it all in one account, you're going to be tempted to want to use your rainy day fund for things that it's not supposed to be used for. A vacation is great, and I think you should go on vacation, but that's not an emergency, right? When your car is 12 years old and it's starting to break down and it's time to buy a new car, okay, well, that's not an emergency, right? Like a flat tire is an emergency, but you can see that coming a long way away that you're going to need a new car. So have your rainy day fund, but then if there's other short-term things that you're saving for in cash, keep that separate, at least in your mind, but even in a separate account would be a good idea, because those are two different goals for cash. A couple last words of direction. Rainy day fund is more important than maxing out your retirement or college savings. So if you're like, hey, Nate, I don't have a rainy day fund, but I also know I need to be saving more for retirement, for my kids' college, for those types of things. The only exception here, because I would say prioritize your rainy day fund before you start investing for the long term. The only caveat to that is if you have a match through your employer. So if your employer offers you a 3% match, do that first, because you're getting an immediate 100%. You're doubling your money. So do that. But then after your match, then start putting money into your rainy day fund and build that up over time. Once that's where it needs to be, then start doing more for retirement. So, and if you're short on your rainy day fund right now, build it into your budget. You say, okay, I've got $3,000 in there and it needs to be 20. That just seems so impossible for me right now. Well, it's not going to happen in a couple months. What you need to do though is start systematically saving. Set up an automated transfer every paycheck, every month, to go from your checking into a separate savings account. And make it a non-negotiable. Treat it like another utility bill. And what's going to happen is you're going to build in that habit, and then over time you can even increase that. You say, I can only do $100 right now. Okay, start with $100. And in a couple months, bump that up to $125, and then bump it up to $150, and gradually, incrementally. And what you'll be surprised is after a couple years, there'll be quite a big chunk in there. And you'll be feeling a lot better because you have that cash, that safety blanket in place for when, not if, those emergencies come across. And believe me, your future self will be very, very thankful. Thanks for listening, for watching. I'll see you on our next episode.